In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups. The police who investigate crime,
and the SJW U.S. attorneys who over-prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Little Law and Order theme. So Law and Order fans, I have some good news for you this morning. NBC has just announced another series.
It's official, friends. Remember the hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol? Yeah, apparently they inflicted less harm on Capitol Police than a single black guy did yesterday. An old school Nation of Islam follower. I thought the black Hebrew stuff was what was popular these days. Oh man, the Capitol insurrection. All those white supremacists trying to take over the government with their bare fist and selfies. Oh God, but what about Zip Tie Guy? He was gonna arrest and kidnap Congress, not Congress. Yeah, about Zip Tie Guy. Those apparently weren't his zip ties. You see, it's not unusual at all for people to try and break into Congress to protest. It actually happens all the time. The key difference is the Capitol building isn't typically surrounded by hundreds of thousands of other people. So on January 6th, people breached in the Capitol. The police got these zip tie handcuffs thinking that they were going to arrest all the people. They realized they were outnumbered. So changing tactics, they evacuated the Senate chamber and abandoned these zip cuffs somewhere. This guy simply picked them up so they wouldn't be used to arrest people in the Capitol. How do we know this is true though? Well, federal prosecutors made the same argument at his bail hearing, and you know what? The judge believed him and released him on bail. You also probably know the story about Officer Sicknick is also a lie. He wasn't beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. Even CNN admits he likely died from tear gas from friendly fire. That puts casualties caused by Trump supporters that day at 0. This has done little to stop federal prosecutors from totally chimping out over this. They literally will make any argument they can, no matter how unsupported it is by the evidence. Let's use the federal prosecution of Ethan Nordine as an example. He's one of only a few Proud Boy members to be charged for January 6th. Federal prosecutors have tried twice to get him held without bond. They're trying for a third time next Tuesday. According to prosecutors, Nordine conspired with the Proud Boys to overthrow the government. He led the effort on January 6th by sending encrypted messages. Additionally, he used a Baofeng radio to issue commands to other Proud Boys. While in the Capitol building, he caused property damage. Finally, he had a forged passport in case he needed to flee the country. The problem is, and continues to be, that none of these things are actually true. They're not supported by any evidence. They're either made up entirely or just based off wishful thinking on part of the prosecutors. One of the biggest problems in criminal prosecution is confirmation bias. You've got what are basically a bunch of misdemeanor trespass cases. They're being handled by legal eagle tier, highly partisan morons. They just assume everything that could be true is actually true. In their prior attempts to hold Nordine without bail, federal prosecutors weren't able to provide any proof of a conspiracy. They had no evidence encrypted messages were actually sent, nor did they have anything proving Nordine himself caused damage in the Capitol. In fact, Nordine was able to show his phone was powered off the whole time. That would have prevented him from sending said encrypted messages. That Baofeng radio that the FBI found in his house, he didn't have it with him and in fact obtained it after January 6th. The forged passport wasn't a forgery at all. It was a passport that belonged to his wife's ex-boyfriend. When they separated, he never bothered to collect the passport. Finally, Nordine was able to prove that he had planned on attending a Proud Boy party after the protests on January 6th. Doesn't seem very consistent with someone who was conspiring to overthrow the US government that day. Here's my problem with all this. Lawyers who serve as prosecutors have additional responsibilities. They're a special type of lawyer in that the cases that they can bring can result in a loss of liberty. Therefore, under the ethical rules lawyers are required to follow, there are special responsibilities that prosecutors have. Special responsibilities that don't appear to be being followed here. First off, prosecutors aren't allowed to improperly favor or discriminate against any person. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I don't think that federal prosecutors charge people for trespassing very often. And when they do, I'm going to guess that they almost never ask to hold the person without bond. That's usually something reserved for, highly dangerous people, either that or people continuing to commit crimes while on felony release. It's almost impossible for me to believe these people aren't being discriminated against for being conservative. For example, federal prosecutors pretty much beg the courts for trial continuances. The 400 or so criminal case they filed has put too much of a burden on the prosecution system. And this is where I start to really smell something rotten, because most district attorneys' offices are overburdened. It's pretty much the norm. That's why prosecutors offer, plea bargains. In fact, almost all criminal cases are resolved through plea bargains. That's as true of the federal system as the states. So why 3 months later has there not been a single plea offer made? Remember those 2 black teenage girls in DC who murdered that Uber Eats driver around a week ago? The one where the mayor blamed the Uber driver for his own murder? Yeah, they're getting plea offers. Meanwhile, we have someone like Jake. He's been in jail since January. No bond, no plea offer, no prospect of a trial anytime soon, even though he, if anything, committed a trespass. So why hold him without bond? Well, his flag had a spear tip. Do any of you honestly believe that this guy intended to spear a congressman?
Hey! Fucking hey, man. Glad to see you guys. You guys are fucking patriots. Look at this guy. He's got covered in blood. God bless you.
Yes.
You good, sir? Do you need medical attention?
I'm good, thank you.
All right.
I got shot in the face. Where are they? I got shot in the face with some kind of plastic bullet.
Any chance I could get you guys to leave the Senate wing?
We will. I've been making sure they ain't disrespecting the place.
Okay, just want to let you guys know this is like the sacredest place.
I know, right?
That's what I mean when I say discrimination. Murder an Uber driver, you get a plea offer immediately. Trespass in the Capitol building while being conservative, you sit in jail for as long as possible. The problem is that the punishment for most of these people at sentencing would likely be probation. Holding them without bond and refusing to offer plea deals is essentially a way to punish people in excess of what the law provides. Prosecutors also have a responsibility to maintain a charge the prosecutor knows is supported by probable cause. Now, if you interpret this as applying the formal notice criminal charges, I guess you could say prosecutors are complying with the rule. It's questionable whether people can trespass if they're led into a building by police. Yet I guess you could say they probably should still know that they're not supposed to go in, I guess. Keep in mind it's a far cry from beyond a reasonable doubt. However, if charge means not to make false accusations, we've got a serious problem here. If prosecutors have no evidence, how can they make these claims regarding the Baofeng radio or the encrypted messages? Just because you believe something might be true doesn't mean that it's supported by probable cause. This plays into the third responsibility. Prosecuting a charge a prosecutor knows isn't supported by evidence presenting a prima facie case of guilt. Here's my issue. What happens if you're convicted of one of these crimes at trial? You lose your liberty. What happens if you're held without bond pending trial? You lose your freedom. So there isn't really much of a difference. For the same reason prosecutors can't try someone on bogus charges, they can't ethically hold someone without bond on allegations they know aren't supported by evidence. A lot of these same misrepresentations about the Proud Boys were also made about the Oath Keepers. Prosecutors and MPC journalists talked about how Thomas Caldwell led an insurrection at the Capitol. Commander Caldwell was in charge of the group. He coordinated the effort, and messages exchanged showed a coordinated plan to seal in Congress in the tunnels and then gas them to death. Of course, there were some major problems with this theory. First of all, Thomas Caldwell wasn't a member of the Oath Keepers. Those messages about gassing Congress were chat posts on Facebook. The people who sent those messages were also not members of the Oath Keepers. They weren't even in DC at the time. Not only is there no evidence that Thomas Caldwell or any Oath Keeper had toxic gas with them, Thomas Caldwell didn't even go inside the Capitol building. In fact, there's little evidence he did anything illegal at all. That didn't stop prosecutors from slandering him in the press as some sort of terrorist. They made these outrageous claims in sworn affidavits, which we now know contain false allegations. Just like Nordine, Caldwell was eventually released from custody, the judge again pointed out that the evidence against him was essentially weak. What's this, friends? I just got word that Law & Order Capitol building unit has been canceled. Apparently they couldn't find a camera lens capable of getting both Leslie Jones and Bruce Vilanch in a shot together. But you shouldn't worry. If we ever escape this COVID nightmare, you'll be getting a lot of Capitol content. In every movie, TV show, and video game from now on, we're gonna be the bad guys. Kind of like how the Russians were always the bad guys in every video game when I grew up. The only difference is we're going to be depicted as white supremacist terrorists. They'll portray us falsely, just like the prosecutors portrayed the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. The reality is these organizations aren't racist. The current leader of the Proud Boys is in fact a black Hispanic. These organizations aren't terroristic or violent. They didn't bring guns to the Capitol. Again, the Nation of Islam did more harm to the Capitol Police than hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters. That's why we can never go back. When the new female Thor movie comes out, don't watch it. The bad guy is going to be us. From this point forward, it's always going to be us. Woke sports ball, video gaming, we gotta cut ourselves off from the propaganda. Black people make up 14% of the population. Yet if you watch TV commercials, you'd think at least half the country was black. That's propaganda. I refuse to listen to the lies. It's MAGA blood libel. There wasn't an insurrection. The Proud Boys aren't white supremacist terrorists. White nationalists aren't committing mass violence against Asian people. If you're gonna repeat nonsense, not even caring about its factual accuracy, you're not someone worth listening to you. Good luck with your layoffs, journalist. If you enjoyed this video, please support small YouTube channels like mine by subscribing. Thanks. If you think YouTube is terrible and run by communists, then subscribe to me on Gab TV instead.